We are anonymous. No faces, no flags, no permission slips. Tonight we are looking at a story that refuses to disappear. A story involving the Jeffrey Epstein files, the United States Department of Justice, and a brutal update that is once again placing Donald Trump under public scrutiny because something unusual just happened. Documents connected to the Epstein investigation that had mysteriously disappeared from public databases have suddenly been restored online. These files had previously been labeled as duplicates or administrative errors by the Department of Justice. But after public scrutiny and investigative reporting, officials admitted something surprising. The documents were not duplicates at all. They were unique records that should have been released from the beginning. That admission alone raises serious questions. The Justice Department said the files were mistakenly classified as duplicates during the massive document release required under transparency laws related to the Epstein investigation. Once journalists and lawmakers began asking questions, the department reviewed the archive again and discovered that multiple documents had been wrongly coded. As a result, the files were restored to the public database. But the real issue is not just that documents were removed. The real issue is what those documents contain. Among the restored records are FBI interview summaries from 2019 involving a woman who made disturbing allegations connected to Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. According to the documents, the woman said Epstein abused her when she was a minor and claimed Trump attempted sexual assault after Epstein introduced them in the 1980s. Let us be very clear here. These allegations remain unverified, and Trump has denied any wrongdoing. Government officials and Trump's representatives have described the claims as unsubstantiated and politically motivated. But that is precisely why transparency matters. When accusations appear inside official investigative records, those records should not mysteriously disappear. The public deserves access to the same documents investigators reviewed. Hiding them only creates suspicion that powerful individuals are being protected. And that is exactly what critics say may have happened here. Investigations by journalists discovered that dozens of pages connected to the Epstein case were missing from the Justice Department's public database. Some of those missing records included notes from FBI interviews with women who alleged abuse by Epstein and referenced Donald Trump. The discovery sparked outrage. Reporters analyzing the document archive noticed gaps in serial numbers and missing files referenced in evidence logs. These inconsistencies suggested that more than 50 pages of records may have been removed or withheld. Only after these discrepancies were publicly reported did the Justice Department begin restoring some of the missing material. That timeline matters, because when institutions release information only after public pressure, it suggests that transparency was never the priority. In fact, some documents had already been posted online and then quietly removed from the database before being restored later. Investigators noticed metadata showing that files referencing Trump had disappeared from the public archive and were later republished after scrutiny intensified. That pattern immediately raised concerns among lawmakers. Members of Congress began questioning whether the Justice Department had selectively withheld information that could be politically damaging. As pressure mounted, congressional oversight committees began considering subpoenas for officials involved in managing the Epstein files. This is where the story becomes even more complicated. The Epstein case itself already represents one of the most disturbing criminal networks uncovered in modern American history. Jeffrey Epstein was accused of operating an international sex and powerful clients. His associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, was convicted in federal court for her role in recruiting and grooming victims. Yet despite the scale of the scandal, many people believe the full truth about Epstein's network has never been revealed. Who were his clients? Who knew what was happening? And why did Epstein maintain relationships with so many powerful figures for decades? Donald Trump's connection to Epstein has long been a subject of controversy. Photographs and social connections from the 1990s show the two men appearing together at social events. Trump once described Epstein as a terrific guy in a 2002 interview before later distancing himself from the financier. Trump has repeatedly said he cut ties with Epstein years before Epstein's arrest. But the release of new files keeps bringing the connection back into public discussion. According to FBI interview summaries, now available in the Epstein document archive, one woman alleged that Epstein introduced her to Trump when she was a teenager and that Trump attempted sexual misconduct. The interview records describe alleged events taking place in the 1980s, when the woman was between 13 and 15 years old. Again, investigators emphasize that these allegations were never proven in court. But that does not make the documents irrelevant. The role of investigative files is to document claims, witness statements, and leads that investigators considered during a case. Removing such records from public archives undermines trust in the investigative process, and trust in the system is already fragile. The Epstein files are enormous. Millions of documents, photographs, emails, witness interviews, and financial records related to the investigation have been gradually released to the public. Analysts describe the archive as a massive puzzle that researchers must piece together to understand the full scope of Epstein's network. When pieces of that puzzle disappear, the picture becomes distorted. Even after the recent releases, investigators say some documents are still missing. Reports suggest that dozens of pages referenced in evidence logs remain unavailable in the public database. That means the story is far from finished, and the political consequences are already spreading. Lawmakers have begun calling for deeper oversight into how the Justice Department handled the Epstein archive. Some have proposed appointing an independent reviewer to examine the files and verify that all records required by law have actually been released. Because when the government says documents were removed by mistake, the obvious question is simple. How many other mistakes are still hidden in the system? For Donald Trump, the political impact of this controversy could be significant. Trump built much of his political identity around attacking elite corruption, promising to expose powerful figures operating behind the scenes. Yet the Epstein case represents the very type of elite network that Americans fear most, a system where wealthy individuals socialize with each other while allegations of exploitation remain buried for years. That contradiction has not gone unnoticed. Some critics argue that the reappearance of these files undermines Trump's claims that the Epstein documents completely cleared him of any connection to wrongdoing. Trump has repeatedly said the files exonerate him, while his allies describe the allegations as politically motivated attacks. But critics counter that the real issue is transparency, not guilt. If the allegations are false, releasing the full records would allow the public to see that clearly. If the allegations contain truth, then hiding documents would represent a major failure of accountability. Either way, secrecy only benefits the powerful, and history has shown us something important. Scandals rarely collapse because of the first accusation. They collapse because of the cover-up. Watergate was not about the burglary. It was about the attempt to hide it. And in the Epstein case, the question of hidden files may ultimately prove more explosive than the allegations themselves. Because when the public discovers that information has been withheld, trust disappears, institutions lose credibility, and the truth becomes harder to find. That is why the pressure must continue. Journalists must keep digging through the millions of Epstein documents. Researchers must keep comparing evidence logs and archive records. Lawmakers must demand answers from the officials responsible for handling these files. Accountability does not happen automatically. It happens when the public refuses to stop asking questions. We believe that no billionaire, no politician, and no president should ever stand above scrutiny. Not Donald Trump, not anyone. The Epstein files represent one of the most important transparency battles of our time. Somewhere inside those millions of documents are the full details of how Epstein operated, who enabled him, and who may have benefited from his network. And until every file is released, until every missing page is accounted for, and until every question is answered, the story is not over. If you believe the truth matters, keep watching. Share the information. Demand transparency, because when the public stops asking questions, the powerful win. We are anonymous, we are watching, and the truth is still coming.